What is up, everybody? Solomon here. Super excited to be with Genfinity, interviewing a multitude of builders across Web3. I know we're dealing with a couple of kind of technical issues here, but I know Urs is going to get his camera working in a second. This is going to be an awesome space. We don't often get to talk to such big institutions as Boston Consulting Group's BCGX, which is kind of the tech build and design arm. So that being said, bear with us for a second here as we get the camera working. And I always like to start these out with a little bit of an introduction and an overview. So, Urs, if you could give us an overview of your role at BCGX as we kind of kick off here, that would be fantastic.
Super, and Ryan, thanks so much for having me. It was great fun actually to meet you the other day. So my name is Urs. I'm a partner at BCG X. 18 years in the company. Been running BCG's company builder, which was called Digital Ventures, for 10 years. BCG X is, so to say, a bit the revamped proposition that BCG carries in the market to help corporates build new businesses, new products, new services, new capabilities based on frontier technology. And we're a group of 3,000 people globally. Basically, I sometimes like to say we're the blue collar team. We do help corporates stand up new stuff with technology. So we got a deep bench of data scientists, as AI is a very big theme for us. It's actually a very, very significant part of the BCG Group's revenues. And so as part of that team, I'm sitting on the global frontier tech team, and I head our Web3 team, which means I'm engaged with a lot of corporates, institutions, governments, who figure out what to do with blockchain. And so part of it is definitely that we also build stuff there, but there's definitely also a lot of questions on, where is regulation going? What does it mean for my business? The threats, opportunities to uncover. And so it's a very intriguing time to lead that team. And so in a nutshell, that's what I do, day to day, Ryan.
No, that's awesome. And I know, it's interesting to me because, we talked about this kind of offline. Like, I've had the opportunity to interview everybody from, builders like that are, launching NFT projects all the way up to enterprise. But you guys are kind of interesting, and this is going to be a really fascinating discussion for me because you mentioned kind of the boots on the ground and how important that is. And you mentioned kind of some of these discussions that you guys are having with enterprise and institutions globally right now. And I guess I'm curious, from your standpoint, there's obviously been a lot of shifts over the past couple of years as far as where we're at adoption wise. What's your kind of overall take on the state of the industry right now compared to maybe where we were at a year, 2 years, 3 years ago? Because it's certainly shifted.
Yeah, and let me do one disclaimer up front that might disappoint some listeners, but I hope you get why. Yeah? So I'm not so interested in crypto as a speculative asset class, and that's to say has had its ups and downs, and there's very likely another up happening right now. I'm more interested in blockchain as technology and blockchain networks as sources of value creation, and how corporates can leverage those, like we use in our mission. Used to say, to look around the corner, what's the next big game for corporates to play? And so I think if I look at blockchain specifically as a technology, I think a couple of things have changed that actually make corporates far more intrigued in a sober, rational way into what's the merit of this technology for me today than a few years ago. And I think some of the heavy investments in the last cycle that went into the infrastructure, into some of the layer ones to make it, things more scalable, more secure, but then also enabling new things, how smart contracts have evolved. I think there is a surprisingly deep understanding of the technology in many IT departments and development departments around the globe, and a constant monitoring of how can we use this technology. I think what has changed is a few years back, the blockchain community was looking at disrupting the world, and I was a bit skeptical about this whole disruption ethos. Maybe what we see with Gen AI is truly disrupting as we look at it, but in the end, I think mostly technologies are driving in the end incremental, more or less paced evolutions on how things are happening, and I think that is also how I and actually many of our corporate clients look into this. They look into a theme that we coined as embedded blockchain. So not the standalone Web3 tech stack that replaces old legacy systems, but really how do layers of blockchain really improve the value that technology can bring to corporate, maybe in settlement in trading. I think there's a vast amount of activity around the globe to look into how blockchain, tokenization of assets can actually improve the efficiency, the speed, but also the cost of operations for settlement services. And so I think it's becoming really real, but not in the sense of replacing everything, but really embedding in it. I think that's the theme of probably the last 12 months that I saw happening. And now with a lot of regulation actually coming in place. I feel this is accelerating.
Yeah, I know, being in this space, there always seems to be kind of this, what's the new term that's going to be coined? That's like
Totally.
super hypey. And one of the things that's interesting, and I know obviously tokenization kind of taking the lion's share of just eyes on this space, I would say 12 to 18 months, but that's been around. I mean, they were talking about tokenizing real estate in 2016, 2015 timeframe, stuff like that. And I'm always interested to kind of hear insight, because you mentioned, you kind of allude to some of it. It's like, these institutions and enterprises, things like that, these real world assets aren't going to be tokenized just to tokenize them. Like it's really kind of about, and there's a lot of kind of infrastructure stuff that goes into that too. Like even you could tie in digital identity into the tokenization of assets, because it's super important to be able to accurately identify something. And then it's really about, what do you do with something once it's tokenized? And I think you kind of get into that a little bit. And I guess I'm curious your take just on, can you maybe extrapolate a little bit on what tokenization potentially brings to the table for?
Yeah. No,
I think that's a fascinating one. I think in theory, we've been speaking about this for years. You could tokenize real estate. I think what we're seeing is that digital assets are getting more and more tokenized. Yeah, I think it's probably the most straightforward play. Yeah, but then funny, there's a website of ours going on. Nice. I didn't see that advertising, but it's good. Yeah, so keep it rolling whilst you're listening to my thesis on tokenization. So I think digital assets have been a thing. I think there's a lot of, let's call it all various financial assets that are being traded, maybe commodities, physical commodities, maybe derivatives, maybe securities. I think there's a vast, attention to how this can actually improve, the trading proposition of trading platforms. And then I think what is really interesting is to think of, so there are digital assets, there are real world physical assets that are being tokenized. I happen to sit on the board of a startup that is actually into tokenization of fine art. So I can see a lot of that merit, and this will be though a slow process, and then somewhere accelerated because I have a bunch of players agreeing. This is kind of a new interesting standard. I think the third category of things that are being tokenized, which I find most intriguing, especially in the age of AI, is data. And if you think about one very interesting use case we see with a lot of clients is they want to vouch for the integrity of some data, maybe for CO2 accounting, for accounting for their ESG footprint. And so if you can show an immutable record, all the benefits that blockchain offers, but it needs to go basically back to the IoT device, which in the end creates the data point. So you see actually not only that, there's data streaming from an IoT device into an ERP or any other system, and then there's a tokenization layer. You even see efforts to go into actually on-chip, like on-device tokenization, to make the transition of the data truly immutable. And so I think there's something very interesting happening there in the IoT space. And then in AI, you have a lot of questions around proof of personhood, which in many regards you could say is an archetypical use case where blockchain technology may be particularly relevant. So I think that is, especially in the age of AI, where corporates are looking even deeper into what is my data advantage. What data do I carry that's proprietary? I think there's something very interesting all along the AI tech stack to explore about where tokenization may be, again, additive in creating value out of data.
Yeah, I think you bring up an interesting point where, and you and I were talking about this a little bit offline, where, we live in such an attention-driven world. Everything is about this kind of attention economy. And it's really hard to figure out what's real versus what's not real. And I would assume that since we're kind of just scratching the surface with some of this stuff now, that it gets even more hairy in the future as far as being able to actually prove authenticity and like you mentioned, proof of personhood even. And, that comes down to an individual, that comes down to an asset, that comes down to almost anything. And it was interesting to kind of watch like the Chat GPT moment occur last year. Obviously, AI has been around for, a long time, but is that where you feel like the overlap and intersection kind of makes more sense? Like the provenance that blockchain offers, being able to actually maybe streamline like digital signatures that actually authenticate something, or the data that goes into these training models, things like that. Can you maybe just extend a little bit on?
Yeah. No. I think if you think of AI and maybe the tech stack or the journey of data through an AI and an LLM, I think there are different points where there is a reliable thesis that blockchain could add to making these more valuable. Yeah, there's this big unsolved conflict on copyright. And I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an IP lawyer. I don't want to take a stance on is it fair use or a copyright infringement here. But if you think about how to resolve for it, there could be a way to think about the micropayment capability that very scalable blockchains can provide. Yeah. Then there's of course still an attribution challenge, but all the inputs that go into LLMs, for every output, you could actually and find some algorithmic logic how each of the contributors, and there will be myriads of contributors to an LLM, has contributed to it and would actually be allocated a very, very, very small friction of a micropayment. So I think that is actually something. I wrote a paper with a few colleagues on this a month ago or so. We issued it, and so we had a lot of influx from very intrigued people who are actually IP owners on content to explore this. Yeah, so big media publishers and so on. So I think there's definitely something to explore there. Yeah, and then there, of course, is a question on the costiness of this, which is sometimes something that the blockchain community tends to forget. Yeah, if we layer our technology into a legacy stack that has already comes at a cost, or AI might not be legacy yet, but also AI comes at a quite high cost of operations, as we read every day. If we layer in blockchain, is the incremental value we get out of it worth the incremental cost? Yeah, and that's in the end the equation I tend to take for every single use case. I want to understand, is there a real return for corporate or maybe also retail, person to go there, and so that was one specific application. I think there could be something very different about. And there are some actually initial efforts there. I think one by Decentralized on, can you run those models on chain to ensure that no one has fudged the models, yeah, and no one has introduced biases into black box models. And so I think there are, if you go through the journey, quite some interesting vantage points where I know actually a couple of projects are happening that I feel are quite promising to finally make this convergence of AI and blockchain show the value.
I want to kind of get into a little bit of, and I was kind of going through the BCGX site and just kind of looking through all the really, really fascinating solutions that are kind of being developed, because I do think that being in the blockchain landscape, there's the tendency for people to kind of just focus on what's trending on Twitter and not looking not looking on what's actually at what's actually going on as far as real world adoption. And I'm sure you can touch on some of these solutions, and I'm sure you will. But I kind of wanted to ask you about meeting. You talked about meeting enterprises and institutions where they're at, and kind of having this boots on the ground aspect where, I think a couple of years ago, there was a lot of people that were like, there's going to be this flip the switch moment, and every single legacy architecture is just going to switch over to Web3. And that's obviously not what's happened.
Nope.
What's that experience been like talking to these enterprises? Like, is there stronger forward-thinking leadership within these enterprises to enact like meaningful change and integration of the technology? And what are some of the easy wins that you've seen, and where do you maybe expect that going in the future?
Yeah, and let us stay for a moment here on AI, and then go back to blockchain.
Yeah.
But so BCG has always been very, very proactive when we look at traditional AI. In a way, the next level of advanced analytics. We have been very, very focused on this. And if you look at the second product there, it's a service that has very high demand of us, which is basically bringing hyper personalization to all kind of customer engagements. Yeah, and if I look at the openness of corporates, yeah, to look into this, they almost all see it by now. If you go to a boardroom in a consumer-facing company, everyone would agree personalization is a top priority for us. It's actually not that people would be skeptical. Can we do this? They even are very versatile by now to understanding the data constraints in terms of what data do we have. Yeah. Oh, we can purchase these kind of data. Yeah. The data sets. Like what kind of algorithmic capabilities do we need? Do we need to build these models in-house? Are these models available? What's really differentiating for us? So personalization is a pervasive theme. And when we started our journey on personalization, we actually had a joint venture with Starbucks called Formation that was a very cool play around, in the end, creating hyper personalized experience for any shopper. So basically campaigns where personalized to the individual, yeah, and like a segment of one approach. Then everyone was saying, no, this is too frontier. No one's going to do this. And by now we have demand for this big time in the boardroom. So if you look at that, it's exactly here. Yeah. So here on AI, in terms of customer engagement and how it enables this, we are here. Yeah. Also, when it comes to like very mundane processes in most corporates, which is supply chain operations, I think the openness and readiness to use AI, and I'm not talking generative AI, but really traditional AI to do better forecast, yeah, on demand and production is there. I think we rarely see a leading corporate not being there. So I think AI is becoming true mainstream in the corporate world. Whereas I think on blockchain we're in a different chapter yet. Yeah, there are forward-leaning companies. Give me one second, please.
Sure.
So I was hiding in my hotel room here, and someone knocked the doors. So sorry for that, and kept on knocking. So AI has arrived in the boardroom. So we actually survey we have a regular survey going out on AI maturity. And it's not about is there value, it's really about how do I harvest it? Because that's less trivial, yeah. So it's a how question, not an if question, or do we do it, yeah? And on blockchain, we are a bit more timid, but I think in certain industries, yeah, and on certain themes, you see also a broad understanding this is valuable. I'll give you one example on actually one thing that we have done a couple of times in various forms, yeah. In the end, it's about tokenizing the product passport of any kind of physical product. Yeah, think about steel. Steel by now can be produced entirely green, yeah, with electric furnaces and sourcing considerations. You can make steel entirely CO2 free. Now this, if an electric furnace is running on renewables and yeah. And so how do I vouch for that? Because I can in the market, win a green premium for green steel, which I can declare with trustworthiness, yeah. Or look at how airlines are using sustainable fuels, yeah, and they only have, I don't know, let's say 10,000 hectoliters of this available, but they need to vouch for that they're not having people book more of this, than they really have. And these kind of book and claim use cases are also very interesting. We need to vouch for the trustworthiness that the corporate is not giving you false data. Yeah, and evidently, every reasonable corporate wants to be providing trustworthy volumes of this. And so I think ESG tracking, CO2 tracking, product passport is a real thing. Yeah, I think I've not seen a corporate for the last 12 months where engaged in the conversation where there was not a conviction blockchain is part of the solution. It's again more how question. Yeah? And then there is a bigger challenge than in AI is navigation. Yeah? Why AI is at the moment crazily dynamic. And blockchain, by the way, is also, but maybe less visible. Corporates lack the typical navigation signs. Navigation sign, Google, Azure,
Yeah.
it's very easy. Yeah, it's established. Yeah, and in blockchain, where are the navigation signs? Yeah, who knows Kraken? Yeah, what is Kraken? Yeah, so and I'm not being disrespectful, but I think even some of the larger companies, people can't judge by just the brand. Is it trustworthy or not? And these brands that have been built for 50 years, yeah, they are missing evidently in the blockchain land. And I think that is exactly one of the key challenges. Is I know there's something, I understand technology, but I'm very, very limited in reading that space in terms of what are good choices. Yeah? That's so to say, I think where we are with a lot of forward-leaning boards and rallying around certain use cases where in the end, data provenance, as you call it, is top of mind. Yeah?
I think it's really interesting. As far as a lot of the real world adoption that I think is going to occur is like in these kind of non-sexy use cases. Like
yes.
and you bring it up. It's like, I have experience working in like heavy manufacturing and things like that. And like, there's really not a whole lot that's being historically that's been done as far as like traceability of like steel, for example. Like you would normally get gigantic sheets of steel, and the tracking on those sheets of steel is like a lot number that is like written on the piece of steel. And you're just like crossing your fingers that it's not counterfeit and all the other stuff. And you even bring up aviation, which I think is a super valid industry that I think has room for disruption. And you look at like potential counterfeit bolts, nuts, things like that go into the maintenance of aircraft. even supply chain, like the UK just passed a digital document law for the first time in 2023. And, you know, across the board globally, like there's still regulations in place that require a hand signed bill of lading that go back to like the late 1800s, which is wild to me that like we're sitting here in 2025 wondering why stuff can't clear customs for clients. And it's like, well, you know, it's because we're still dealing with stuff, you know, that goes back, you know, hundreds or so years or so. And I'm just curious from your stance, because you do have such, you know, BCG is a giant, obviously, and BCGX, you have a lot of kind of the relationships as well. And, you know, your kind of take on, do you think that the most impact, do you think that we're going to see a lot more impacts coming out and like maybe use cases that aren't necessarily trending on Twitter for real world adoption, and what that kind of looks like, just to expand on that a little bit?
Nah, it's a super good call, Ryan. And then I would 100% vouch for that. Yeah, I think what I'm seeing is, again, I think a couple of themes, yeah, that are in the end not in the sexy or, you know, very very visual land of NFTs. In the end, they are deep in B2B applications, less so than in B2C applications. Yeah. I think most of the early efforts to roll, you know, NFT based experiences into loyalty programs for have stalled, yeah, and have been wound down. We see actually, funny enough, this year a new demand on, hey, what can we do in loyalty? But I think it's in B2B, yeah? And in this kind of supply chain use cases, this is one big field. I think one other one I mentioned earlier, which is really big if you think about the impact it has, is around, you know, how all kind of trading mechanisms are basically being automated, yeah, simplified, scaled with blockchain. So settlement mechanisms are a big thing, yeah. A couple of our clients in this space, also on the so to say corporate side, but also on the native blockchain side, have made some very big efforts that are, I think, paying off now, as we see, you know, big banks looking into tokenizing bonds and all kinds of things, but really also thinking about how can we dramatically improve the efficiency of settlement. And there are several layer ones that have the scalability, yeah, and that means also the cost per transaction that now allow to look into this. So I would, without having, you know, having the crystal ball, I think these two would be very hidden ways where we see a lot of blockchain, you know, coming through. Yeah?
I think one of the things that's been apparent, and I know we're going to get into some of the overlaps with Hashgraph Association, which I know that you guys were just on a panel at Davos, which is kind of like, I was trying to think of what to title this space, and you guys kind of nailed it. And because I think I titled it something super similar, anticipating breakthrough, key vectors of adoption in 2025. But I wanted to ask you, because, you know, you've been in the space for a long time. I've been in this space probably not even as long as you. And it does, I remember like in 2016, 2017, 2018, kind of doing deep dives and saying, oh, you know, all these entities have like patents that are kind of exploring proof of concepts or exploring integrations and all this stuff. It does seem like there's been a little bit more traction around like meaningful compliance, like regulatory clarity. I can think of like Mika and and, you know, hopefully some stuff in the US coming soon. What do you think, kind of, if we were to have like a little bit more clarity come about, like, because it seems like a lot, like you even have like BlackRock CEO Larry Fink like a couple of weeks ago talking about the tokenization of stocks and bonds, and like these people don't normally just come out and start saying stuff like that until their Bank of America CEO is another one, as far as payments are concerned. You know, what do you think kind of happens, like, as far as if we get some clarity? Do you think, you know, I kind of feel like the writing's on the wall as far as blockchain adoption, like it's just a matter of when and kind of not if, and then navigating like where, you know, where the easy kind of wins are for the use cases. But what's your thoughts as far, I'm rambling now, what's your thoughts as far as like when we do get meaningful compliance, what that kind of opens up for, like, for the space as a whole, and for the incumbents that are kind of looking to dip their toes in?
Yeah, I think there's some major irony at work in a way. Yeah. So I think I'm very convinced actually it's going to be regulators, and not by deregulation per se, but really by giving clarity, regulatory clarity, who will unlock, you know, in the end, a breakthrough adoption of blockchain technologies. And I mean, just take one of the biggest, potentially biggest applications of blockchain, which is CBDCs. I mean, they are by nature, you know, driven by the government and the regulators, yeah. And so, I mean, we see across the world all these sandboxes happening, look at players like the European Union. They're actually pushing ahead. Many of these setups are technology-wise not blockchain pure plays. They're more hybrid, solutions. But I think it's hard to not imagine a world where we won't have digital currencies, digital national currencies at some point, with all the efficiencies, especially at the wholesale level involved. And so I think it's in the end, ironically, for the whole movement, it's the regulators that pave the way, not the other way around. It's not deregulation. It's regulation that brings clarity. Is an NFT a security or not? Yeah. And so if not, what can I do with it? And so I think the more we have guardrails that create a defined playing ground, and we've seen that with lots of other innovation. Yeah. I believe actually we will see a lot of the technology channeling through into better application. And evidently also back to my good old corporates and corporate adoption, that is definitely a concern. If when talking to them and as I said, many of them see blockchain, but then what risk do we take? Reputational risk, yeah. Is there fraud involved? I mean, there's so many fraud cases that happen in this space, yeah, and there are so many zero value ideas. One of our VPs engineering, he sometimes says, I believe blockchain is 99.9% bullshit, but this 0.1% is incredibly valuable. I believe it's a bit more in terms of meaningful projects, in terms of projects that can yield sustainable value. But that is in the end, the lack of navigation. And so regulation will help corporates to feel much clearer and much more confident to adopt. Yeah, I think that is definitely, and we see that in regions or in countries where we have progressive regulation in terms of clarity, how much institutions, enterprises are much more prone to adopt. You see that in the Middle East. The Middle East is emerging as one of the leading playing fields for blockchain adoption across everything, because there is in the end institutional endorsement. And it's not necessarily the easiest and most deregulated approach they took and are taking. Yeah? So I think I'm definitely with you. This is in the end probably the unlock to, let's say, more mainstream adoption of this technology.
Yeah, you have like the UAE and like I can think of like, I'm probably gonna get the name wrong, but I think it's like Startup Bahrain, and there's all sorts of like initiatives coming down from the top level to really kind of cultivate the technology. It's been you bring up CBDC, and I didn't even have that kind of here, but it's been interesting to watch. It seems like there's been almost even a shift with CBDCs to like more bank deposit backed stable coins over the past couple of years, where I've, which maybe was a little bit easier to get across the line as far as in some certain jurisdictions, but that's been kind of interesting to watch as well. What I really find interesting, and I think that you guys serve such a unique role, there needs to be knowledge to kind of, and you and I talked about this before. We always talk about bringing Web 2 into Web 3, and I think it's kind of the other way around. I think it's, how do you inject in the technology in a way that makes sense for these traditional players? And you guys serve almost as like that middle layer role or middleware role, as far as like, consulting and advisory, because you have to have deep understanding of both worlds, I guess. And what is kind of some of the thought leadership that you guys kind of bring to the table? What kind of process do you guys go through as far as what networks and in Web3 would make sense? And I guess, how does that kind of process kind of normally look? I guess just more so curiosity on my end, because I think you guys just provide a lot of value.
Okay, I didn't think I could have a chance to advertise us so much, but I take advantage of that for a minute. No, but fun aside. So in the end, I think in a way, at the basics, it's quite simple what we do. Yeah, we typically have corporates asking us in with a topic. Yeah, I mean, sometimes we come in with a much more an outside-in view. Here's something very interesting for you. Yeah. And that comes from some of the thought leadership that we are continuously driving into all these technologies: AI, blockchain, XR, quantum. Yeah. So there's also proactive elements. But if you think about the more reactive ones, a corporate considering, a full, refactoring of their architecture. Imagine a music publisher. Yeah. That is also involved in managing the rights of the musicians. So in the end, royalties. Yeah. They're looking to revamp their tech stack, and then we need to look into options. Yeah. And then we eventually look into which technologies make sense, and then what requirements do we have for these technologies in such a stack. And then you could I think there are quite some, I would say, not so helpful benchmarks out there because they compare apples and peers when it comes to layer one performances. So it's also, again, not so easy to navigate that there is the one authority on this benchmark. So we in the end help to establish then a short list of what could be the right partners for this, the right technologies to build upon, and then typically also run vertical spikes where we test the technology for it. Yeah, for some of the technology we have a lot of prior experience and depth. Yeah, so it's not coming also from just screening and analyzing it, but really from usage. But in the end, that's what I would say is the typical process. Yeah, I think it's very often actually interesting when it comes to blockchain that corporates are sometimes not aware, of actually some of the capabilities that blockchain solutions, smart contracts in particular around automation can provide. I think there's still a lot of focus on immutability, like basically timestamping, or giving products and so assets identity. I think a lot of the very interesting automation capabilities are not so much seen, which, by the way, if you then cross over to autonomous AI agents, it becomes really interesting. That's, by the way, I forgot that earlier. A very interesting field is, there are these autonomous agents, they're coming. They're gonna bring a whole new level of automation to our lives. But who's going to guardrail them? Like, how do you manage that? And so there needs to be auditability. There needs to be an audit trail on all the behavior and activity of any autonomous agent. Yeah, is he or it behaving according to what we agreed or not? And because it's happening invisibly to me. So there is a beautiful application where timestamped activity, or immutably stored activity of what this agent has been doing, provides the auditability, and then also actually helps to solve the question of liability. Yeah? Has the agent been prompted to do things, or has the agent done things that were not planned to be done? Yeah? So I think there's a beautiful application. But so I think there's assessing what is the best technology for a set use case. There is then exploring what can I do with technology. Yeah? If you look at this company, it's called Arcual, where I sit on the board, backed by MCH, so the holding that owns Art Basel. We've actually went out to say we need to build a master transaction layer for the arts world to bring more fairness, but also lots of other benefits that blockchain can provide to that market. And once you start digging into what you can do, it's beautiful, and it's very intriguing in terms of innovation potential. And so I think the second one is really exploring what is the max, the technology of today, zero knowledge proofs, all these acronyms that no one understands. What can they give me? Yeah? And what is it able to offer? Almost like at the frontier of AI, what are agents doing? What can I do with zero knowledge proofs? And so I think there's this as the second thing we do. And then evidently not making it an echo chamber exercise in a meeting room, but really testing the technology. Yeah, I think there are test nets evidently also in blockchain land, so you can really spike stuff and show how it works. And then ultimately, and that's why I said this so early, it's in the end about ROI. Yeah, return on investment. Is it worthwhile to go that loop? Yeah. And today it requires extra efforts to get everyone on board. This is not reputation damaging. Is it electricity wise? Is this green enough for us? I think these are questions that are still there. Some of them might be actually almost outdated in considerations around blockchain, but they're in the hands of people. So I think there's some extra assessment and extra vouching that's needed to get people confident and to make use of it. But so I think we set with them, we do integrated teams, and help them explore the art of the possible with blockchain.
One thing that I think's interesting, and I didn't have it written here to ask, but I think it's valid because you brought it up earlier. You talked about micropayments, and I find it fascinating that it seems like this space has been so wildly innovative that there's certain use cases come out that are too early even to take gather adoption, because micropayments, I can think of back in 2016, 2017, there being examples of micropayments and blockchain. And then even with Hedera, I mean, kind of the open beta testing was called daily timestamp, and you would read articles and get streamed micropayments. And now we're kind of seeing that come back into the fold, while a handful of years later. I just think it's super interesting because it's almost like these technologies are so rapidly advancing that, once it's almost like when cogs go in the wheel in the correct way, that it does become time for these to actually kind of get integrated, because it makes sense. And the foundations are kind of been laid where maybe society wasn't ready for something like that, but now that this other piece gets brought into the fold, now it makes sense.
Yeah.
Let me ask you real quick. Let me remove your other frozen one up here real quick.
Oh, okay.
No, you're good. You brought up ZK as well, and I have it on here kind of. We've been talking about AI and agentic AI and micropayments and identity and all these different things and blockchain. Obviously, there's a convergence of technology going on. I would love just your thoughts on how all this stuff kind of plays in together, kind of in the future here, because we have, like I said, AI, ZK, digital identity, all these things are going to play a role, and it seems like they're all kind of converging in this like Cambrian explosion of like innovation to an extent.
Yeah, so I used that same term, yeah. So in terms of keeping terms here that are understandable for everyone, I think there's definitely something very interesting happening at convergence of technologies, and I can overlay another one, which is in the end, let's call it extended reality, not to use virtual reality. Yeah. Yes, Meta has been bashed for this and so on, but also there we see actually real world application of this driving value, and value will drive ultimately this to come through. Let me stay on one example here. We're currently building again a very unsexy solution, for a railways operator to actually, they have a challenge not to have enough trained repair personnel. And so the more untrained repair personnel that comes in actually delays repairs, and therefore delays or drives the risk of delaying transportation. So in the end, overlay, like we're deploying an XR solution that actually allows the senior operators to provide upfront, but also in real-time guidance to the operators who repair the train. And that has shown that there is not only like the 20 to 30% efficiency potential that they're getting out of this at scale. And so this is real. And so I think also XR is coming. Why I'm saying this is in the end, and it has been said before, but I'm actually quite convinced also there will be a Cambrian moment. A lot of the big brands in the luxury space, take LVMH, yeah, Louis Vuitton, they have started to tokenize a lot of their production. It's currently running on probably a bit of an outdated setup with Aura from a chain perspective, but they are tokenizing all of their products because ultimately they want to participate in the secondhand market, yeah, and they are confident that the physical secondhand market, but there will also be over time, people will at some point in the future have their handbags also in their virtual world, and there will be some opportunity to participate in that value creation. It's not going to come for free, and so I think that is one element of convergence. I think the most powerful one to really explore now is evidently between AI and blockchain, and why. Just if you think about what drives fundamental value to blockchain networks is usage, yeah, is in the end the number of transactions that are being recorded, and all the value locked on the chains. But if you think about transactions, there's almost no other space where we have such raw, big volumes of compute power, being deployed. And if you can find a way to participate in this, just from a very, very naked value creation perspective, this will be a jackpot. And I think there will be. That would be at least a thesis. There is heavy exploration of this, heavy experimentation around it. If one or two of the today's more forward leading layer ones get into this, that will give them such a leap in advantage in usage that will also, from a network effect, from the reference that they can give out in the market, the testimonial they get, I think that will set them apart from the rest of the pack. And I think therefore this convergence will be one big bang? No, yeah. It will be a series of smaller bangs, but I think we will see a few step changes in our industry. I believe that especially at this convergence, if we find, valuable use cases happening, I think we will see actually quite a shakeout in terms of which layer ones will survive. Some call it the consolidation of the market. I think it's not consolidation because no one will, acquire someone and merge. Yeah, it's basically some of them will die out. And I think that is already, if you look at the pace at which there are a few, 10, 20 layer 1, layer 2 networks that are really set apart from the pack today. I think this will accelerate. Yeah, and I don't know who will be the winners. I'm not speculating because it's difficult to say. But I can say those who will get into the AI stack will be very, very intrigued to stay alive, where others will have more challenges.
I do want to ask, because I know that you were recently, in Davos at the panel with the Hashgraph Association, and a huge shout out to Hashgraph Association for helping to put this together for us today and getting you guys on. I'm curious because I know that and you probably can't say a lot, but as far as kind of the relationship with Hashgraph Association, what that kind of looks like. We've talked about kind of a lot of different industries that you guys have tentacles out into today. And I think we're always curious as far as like, there's so much stuff going on under the hood as far as like what's being tested out and where there's potential overlap. And what's that relationship with the Hashgraph Association like? And like, just wherever you want to take it. And I'll kind of leave that up to you.
Cool. So maybe just going to the very beginning of our conversations briefly, as BCGX, we are asked to help corporates navigate this space, and that requires us to be vendor agnostic. So we are not exclusively in bed with any technology company in the world, also not in AI. We in the end look for what is the very best technology for corporate in the very specific context where they operate and seek value. So and the same holds, so to say, for blockchain. So we entertain relationship with a few blockchain companies, mostly in the layer 1 space, where we have over time figured out that they have some intriguing application to the corporate clients that we have, and are well set up to serve them. And that is, so to say, where Hashgraph came in. So for the past 3 years, we've been actually partnering, collaborating, and discussing a lot with Hashgraph, the Hashgraph Association team, on how to unlock this and serve this appetite in the corporate world for blockchain powered solutions. And so we have actually partnered on very concrete projects together. Some of them are evidently non-disclosed. They are live, they are going live, but let me give you one concrete example where, funny enough, we actually won a prize together, which was we in the end worked with 2 telco companies to look into, again, something very unsexy to our theme today, which is wholesale settlement for roaming. So basically, when 2 telco companies have one user or customer going to the other's territory and receiving phone calls, he's actually in the end not paying to that network provider, and so there needs to be a settlement of this. And so in the end, this is following a quite archaic approach to technology-wise. And here, a single source of truth, what blockchain can provide, a shared source of truth, we found is a very interesting application. And we worked with 2 telco providers to, in the end, build a rapid MVP of a platform that would help there. And we could see significant efficiencies coming of it, and significant, downstream opportunities if you think about shifting this from basically traditional currency-based settlement to something that is more stablecoin based. We had discussions with treasuries and our ongoing and treasury discussions about how can such a solution be deployed in Europe. We're focusing very much in Europe. There are only a couple of countries where there's a lot of cross-border traffic, and therefore roaming activity. And can that be deployed here as an alternative solution to today's legacy approach for faster settlement, almost real-time settlement, instead of doing that actually on an annualized base based on records. And so that is a very interesting one where we went very deep into a B2B a theme of collaboration with Hedera and the Hashgraph Association. And I think that's a very interesting example to illustrate. You can look it up. It's online. There's quite a lot of stuff about it. So that's one. I think another one, we have actually a couple of corporates that came to either of us, and then funny enough, we found out, hey, we serve the same customers, and we even have access to the same individuals at the customer. And so where we are looking into, is there a meaningful way where we bring together our capabilities, us as helping corporates to design, but then also implement, and also change the organization to make use in an effective way of new technologies, and then building on some of the arguably very interesting feats that the Hashgraph Association and Hedera bring. And I think that is actually something, if you think about them specifically, and to just call out others, we are also very close to Decentralized, and the ICP, which from a very different perspective brings some very interesting technology and vantage points, especially also to the AI space. But then with the Hashgraph folks, I think what is interesting, they have invested so early into being a real proposition for enterprises from the governance structure, which is not decentralized in the traditional, fully decentralized paradigm, but we decentralized with the governing council, with which is 30 plus blue chip companies, most of which are BCG customers. So there is the governance model underneath it. Then there is this very strong early dedication to make it green. And not greenwash, but really, make it energy efficient, energy efficient to use technology. I mean, it's ironic. We had corporates looking into, again, these kind of product passports, but then using some of the, let's call it, really energy wasting networks, instead of saying, come on, I need a layer one that is actually incredibly green, so that is actually one thing that pops up early, and where Hashgraph has been early, to position itself. Then also, I think the team has made some much earlier investment than we see this with others. But we see actually a lot of layer ones following now a similar path on, I need to get enterprise ready. And that means evidently, also aspects like Hashgraph launched the Hashsphere. So basically private networks that though interoperate with the public network, acknowledging that, there are certain applications, there are certain themes where corporates still feel very uncomfortable to see data, whatever hashed and hidden, but still, tracked on chain. And so that is, so to say, a third element. I think they're really considerate in terms of what does it take for corporates to make use of our technology. And I find this actually, this is resonating with boardrooms, and that it makes it quite exciting to collaborate with them and look into where are opportunities where we can jointly go. As I said, we're very focused on the MESA region, so not only Europe as a continent, but also Middle East, and Africa, where we see a lot of interesting dynamic, and are looking into a couple of major potential projects we are starting together. So that's I don't know, a short rundown of our collaboration.
It's fascinating. I think you mentioned, I've had the opportunity to interview or have Deutsche Telekom on a couple of times too, and I know that they have kind of the tentacles into the space. And you think about like telco and the value add. There's even something like a use case like roaming charges. I think is so fascinating. One thing to me that I'm just curious your take on it, that I think kind of fascinates me as far as like looking at Hedera, at least from the technology standpoint, is like, it's not like, this Turing complete smart contract based thing that you have to kind of deal with. Like, you don't get the whole thing. You get to kind of choose, like, do I want to leverage consensus service, or do I want to leverage a smart contract service, or do I want to leverage the file service or the token service? So that, I think, ties in a lot to potentially like the meeting users where they're at. And then you add in the spheres, because I know, we've seen this in a lot of networks. They're kind of opening up areas of like subnets. I know even Ripple went with like the private ledger back in the day, and there's some other ones. I'm curious your take just like broadly on like the service-based aspects of Hedera and what that potentially offers to meet users where they're at. Let me ask you maybe that first, and then I'll lead into the spheres question.
So I think in a way, I know this is a very, very crude comparison, but in a way it mimics a bit, what modern architecture wants, almost like a microservice-based approach to things. And so I think going to, if you, and again, so if you go to a layer one, or you're looking for a technology provider that provides blockchain services, the ability to engage with them on an architectural conversation around what's the best way to structure this, and also, what kind of approach do I take? Do I take a private chain, private network? Do I don't take it? What is it? I think that in a way, it's a very consultatory approach to engaging, but that I think combined with having, so to say, packaged up the technology in a way that it plugs in kind of microservices to corporate technology stacks, is exactly to what I said. It allows to embed certain services, and that is, so to say, what I think is making the difference.
Yeah. And then real quick on spheres, and then we'll get into kind of forward-looking statements. But we've seen a lot of different networks, and certainly Hedera included with spheres, kind of taking the proactive approach as far as, I really do think that this also ties into like meeting enterprises, institutions, things like that, or businesses, whoever, where they're at. Maybe just a broader question, like there's obviously got to be portions of, if we go to like a full on-chain economy and everything else, certain portions just have to be private for a lot of these institutions and enterprises, whether it's around data preserving, privacy, like the GDPR stuff or anything else. What's your take on, like, do you think that as meaningful compliance comes in, you'll see more crossovers into the public networks that make sense, while portions obviously still remain private? And just kind of like, do these kind of private networks represent more of a comfort level for these institutions, enterprises to come in and start?
So that's exactly language I would have used. It's exactly so it's meeting corporates where they are. I think many are not ready for certain data. They are even uncompliant to expose them in any hashed way on public chains. Think about pricing information. You're not allowed to share pricing information with competitors. So if it's on a public chain, what do I do with that? So I think there's some real serious concerns that are, again, to be taken into account, and then you can meet them there. I mean, when I first heard about it, I thought we were, in a way, in an age that is beyond Hyperledger and private chains. And not because I'm dogmatic about it, just because I mean, there are so many constraints about making them work, especially if you have collaboration across many different players in the supply chain or an ecosystem. But I really thought we were in a public chain is going to be the standard going forward. I think that subnet / private sphere or a private chain that are interoperable, that allow actually to move as you get more comfortable, without any major, reconfiguration or refactoring into more public network approach. I think they are very interesting application to get corporates on board. And that's so to say, I mean, Hashgraph, again, has been, I guess, quite early. I'm aware of a couple of projects, promising projects with other layer ones that are going to very similar direction to cater to that need. And by the way, that's one thing I found, again, I spent most of my career building products using all kinds of technology, and the one dogma in my head is product market fit. And I've been shocked until today how little of that concept survives or is present in the crypto and blockchain community. So I think it's so much coming from the zero knowledge proof. There's such cool technology, but this is not about foundational technology. It's about value. And value means users use it, corporate users reap value from it, and you can take a reasonable cut from that. That's going to continue to be the reality. And so I think there is a trend at this level of very boring stuff, as you said, infrastructure, B2B services that are becoming that are meeting product needs of corporates. I can give you one other example from where I think, again, Hashgraph has been early to think about it and providing with every corporate they engage SLAs. And that is something corporates know from traditional players. In SLA, you can understand, okay, downtime is one thing, but what happens if we have leakage? So also reinsurances that they bake into their proposition is something that is very traditional enterprise, good old enterprise best practice, enterprise software best practice, and they're replicating this because this meets corporates, as you say, where they are. So I think we definitely will see much more of that happening across the globe, and there will be a bit of a race. Who's providing the more suitable service to enterprises for what kind of use cases?
I think we don't have to get too deep into the weeds, but I do think they kind of nailed it with fixed fees too, as far as like having things just kind of being, these are my costs if I'm a business. Because at the end of the day, I think you're 100% right when you mentioned product market fit. Like the crypto industry is like always, here's this amazing technology. Now let's try to go out and find a user base. It's like, okay, it's the same thing with like, I always find it so funny when like we see like networks like competing with each other, and it's like, why don't we try to get the 95% of people that aren't here into the space using the technology? Like,
good idea. Good idea. No, but I think there's a second thing that I think is a bit more challenging for these B2B applications than in the B2C space. So if you look at why did AI, like one of the many reasons, but why did AI or Gen AI have such a breakthrough? The chatbot, the GPT, is a product with instantaneous time to value. You type something in, you're blown away the first time you do that with the answer you get. And so this time to value experience is super important for people adopting products. And there are not that many blockchain services where there is this instantaneous experience around the value I get. Yeah, it's either a very rational experience. I now have a digital asset in my wallet that's worth X, Y, Z. Yeah, but it's not this kind of wow experience where I think this is probably the most extreme in time to value and product market fit. But I think that is a big challenge, and that's again why I think B2B, where there's a rational view on this, is actually a much more interesting field of application for blockchain than necessary retail.
Yeah, I think man, I could probably talk to you for like another hour, but I know we're not going to.
I would enjoy that.
Yeah, I think it's been interesting to kind of watch, because I think that like the blockchain landscape historically has been very transactional. And it's like, okay, that's great. It's very transactional. Here's a wallet. Here's a digital asset. Here's X, Y, and Z. But I totally agree with you, because at the end of the day, like, it's going to become very, very like experience based. Like I would hope so. Like, we have to be able to like kind of abstract away. We have to abstract away the technology. It can't just be about crypto. It has to be about the underlying infrastructure of what the technology represents and what it can do. And I don't even think we've really scratched the surface of how it's going to interact like totally yet. That being said, I do want to get into, if you could give us your thoughts on the future, forward-looking statements, what you're excited about, whether that's from BCGX's standpoint, or the industry as a whole, that would be fantastic. And it's been awesome having you today.
Look, Ryan, I think it's been also awesome, to spend time with you today and also beforehand. But I think I would probably go back to a few statements we shared today. Yeah? I think one is we are in a very interesting window of convergence of technologies. Yeah, and I think this is an accelerator in many regards, but also an accelerator for layer ones in particular to adopt their play. It's not about benefiting from speculation and pump and dump out there. It's really about where can I create services that enable maybe corporates or users and users to have big advantage. So I think there's a convergence window which drives acceleration and can be breakthrough. I think it sets requirements. That's the second thing. It sets requirements in terms of getting enterprise ready, and that's not a small treat. Yeah, I think shifting towards SLAs in the end, also engaging with corporates where many Web3 players came from a very much I disrupt you attitude, not from a how can we collaborate attitude. It's very different. Yeah, so I think there's a mindset, but also the big capability both in sales, project execution, but then also in technology. There's enterprise readiness is a big requirement. Yeah? Then I think the third one, I think we will see in 25 that we will look back and see fewer layer ones, layer twos than beforehand. I think the real magic question will be, is there value for blockchain in AI? And if we find it this year, that will be a very, very interesting race to adoption. And then beyond that, I think there will be steadily and faster so a big supply chain based, operations based, compliance oriented applications of blockchain that will see far more corporates than today showing that they're using it. Yeah, not only that they're experimenting with it. I think there's a stat that more than 50% of all Fortune 500 companies have active blockchain projects going. And I think that is actually a good testament to where we are. Yeah.
That's awesome. No, and it's always, amazing kind of hearing this stuff. I when we do see kind of, I've been so interested to watch kind of the proof of concept stuff that we've obviously seen for like, a handful of years, maybe a little bit longer, start to come to fruition. And Urs, it's been amazing having you on today, and I would love to have you back in the future. For anybody out there listening, you can go to bcg.com/X and check out all of the amazing work that BCGX is doing. Again, they're the tech build and design unit of BCG, or Boston Consulting Group, top 3 managing consulting firms globally. So bcg.com/X. They've got their official blog on here. They've got all the use cases that you can look through, the product suite. Huge shout out to Hashgraph at hashgraph.swiss, the Hashgraph Association, I should say. And go to their, I give these guys a follow on Twitter as well. So at @_Hashgraph right here, and BCGX is BCGX_. Urs, I definitely want to have you back on in the future and hang out with me for a second as I ramp the stream down here to make sure I get our recordings. And thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was a great pleasure. Thank you.
All right.